Okay, so another video, and this is straight to the YouTube audience instead of me just teaching a regular class. And it's in response to a comment that someone wrote in the comments under one of my videos. And I thought it was a really good sort of comment that I want to read to you guys. And then I want to do a video addressing his questions. And I think it'd be awesome. And I think it's really going to be mostly the story of how I left the New Age movement and became truly Christian, because I think that sort of story arc will address most of what he's saying. So here's his comment. I really appreciate you and your videos. I feel like we are kindred spirits in a way. I was also caught up heavy in the New Age scene in the mid to late 90s, eventually joining a Hare Krishna temple and living there for 10 or 12 years. Through my years in the temple, I happened upon St. Francis and ended up reading The Way of the Pilgrim. It was from there that I realized that Christianity wasn't just evangelicals telling people that they're going to hell, but that it actually had a profound spirituality. I ended up meeting someone who had left the Krishna movement and became an Orthodox Christian. The reason I appreciate your videos so much is because most people in the church have no idea what it means to come to Christ from the Far East. It's completely different than being a Protestant convert to more ancient forms of Christianity. So you are a breath of fresh air, and it's made me feel like someone is finally speaking my language. It's also helped me to appreciate where I've come from. Most people have made me feel as though all of that was demonic and it needs to be tossed. You managed to strike a balance. Anyways, Orthodoxy has its issues that I've always wrestled with. Exclusivist claims have always sat wrong with me, especially coming from the Far East like you and I. I'd love to hear how you managed to pull yourself out of the institutional church, but have managed to hold on to the core teachings. Perhaps you can touch on feelings of fear and guilt for questioning what the church says on these matters, and how you have the confidence to be yourself in Christ. Much love, and then they leave their name, which I won't share. I think that's a great commentary on my video, and I want to address it, and it's going to be, maybe a little bit of a long video, maybe 40 minutes is what I'm thinking. So the first thing that I want to say is, presently in my life, I am 100% Orthodox Christian. I think Orthodox, I mean that with small o. What I mean to say is I don't hold any heretical or fringe beliefs of any kind. And if anything that I think is wrong, according to Catholicism or the Eastern Orthodox Church, I would gladly amend or correct what I think. I think that's always true. And that's because I found a really profound wisdom in these churches that I didn't know was there, and that's really helped me in my spiritual life. So, but coming from the New Age, I spent 10 years in the New Age movement, and I can't say it's all demonic or all wrong or all bad. I can't say that personally. I can say some pretty serious criticisms of the New Age movement, but you've got to parse things out, I think, really finely. And, so first of all, there's the person who's seeking. So a guy like me, my life was a total mess, and I ended up in a 12-step program and met a person there that was in the New Age, but that was also really powerful in his spirituality. And he really pressured me to spend time in prayer and meditation. So, I started really quickly after meeting him. I started meditating 3 to 5 hours a day, and I did that for the whole 10 years that I was involved in the New Age movement. And so, and the way I was taught, first of all, the guy was into Jesus. It was the New Age Jesus, and they are not the same thing. But there's got to be some nuance there. I didn't know that. I always felt an affinity for Christ. I think around 8th grade, I went to a religious Bible camp, and they asked you, it was evangelical kind of thing, and they said, do you want to come up to the front and give your life to Jesus? And I did. And, I went up and I gave my life to Jesus, and I felt the Holy Spirit come over me in a very powerful way. Now, I didn't have a family that was religious. I didn't go to church. I didn't understand who Jesus was or the theology. Never heard of the Trinity. I mean, I didn't know anything. But I was touched by Christ in like 8th grade or 7th grade. And so then I get in the sort of New Age movement with a teacher who is as solid as can be, just as rock solid of a truly spiritual, good human being as you're ever going to find on this planet. And I'm told all kinds of things about Jesus, but also just from the New Age teachings that I just accepted as true. I didn't know better, and so I accepted them. But I'm also spending 3 to 5 hours a day in prayer. And so I can't say, I know for a fact that I can't say that everything that happened to me was evil or demonic or just wrong. I can only say that that 10-year period was a mix of things. So there's the sincere prayer and really just genuinely wanting God to heal my life. And, and I got nailed by a blinding white light right up front, just blinding white light. I couldn't see my room. I opened my eyes, my room was gone, and I was radically transformed. In that blinding white light experience, my entire personality radically transformed. And that was good. That was from God for sure. That was not from the devil. But all along, while I'm really seeking God sincerely as a sincere human being, and God hears that and is responding in my life, all along, though, I'm also reading all kinds of literature that I believe now is wrong. I mean, I believe it's genuinely false. I don't want to get in like really heavy into the details of the sort of form of New Age that I was into, but I read, every book I could get my hands on, and I was absorbing those energies, and I was absorbing those ideas, many of which are just occult practices repackaged in a new way. And that's one of the things I would criticize in the New Age movement, is that there are all kinds of practices that are actually dangerous to people. They can harm your nervous system. First of all, there's channeling. I did crystals and I did channeling. And I think that's about all I really got into. I wasn't really a psychic, but I had spirit guides. So, that's... And the thing about all that is that I think it amped up the energies that were coming through me. But I believe that it can burn a person out. I think it could really hurt a person. Sometimes that's because the entities involved that you're connecting with are demonic. And, people have the wrong idea about demonic. It's you just instantly think of a movie and a devil with horns and flames. But demons are very happy to help you feel bliss, to help you feel joy, if the context of that joy and the teaching around it can lead you completely off track in the long run. And so one of the things I would say about the New Age that's seductive, and all cults actually that are seductive, is that there is sometimes a lot of spiritual power available to a person if they enter into it. It's not just words, it's not just bad theology or incorrect theology. There's power in there. And so that first 10 years of my journey, it culminated in things that were really good, extremely good, and things that were really bad. And it was both. And it's hard. There's so much I want to say, and I don't want to make a 2-hour video. Maybe I just will. But I guess I better take my time so I do a good job and don't make 5 videos where one video could do. But so there is a demonic element for sure. The spirit guides that were talking to me, they turned out to be absolute fools. What they said sounded amazing. It sounded incredible. It just was so beautiful and sometimes poetic and so encouraging, but all focused in one direction, and that one direction was up. Up to joy, up to love, up to you're already whole, up to you're already perfect and you're just asleep and don't realize it. The entire thrust of the teaching that I received, and that I think a large part of the New Age receives, was all up, all up, all up. And that did harm to my nervous system. It did open me to some extremely high dimensions of God consciousness. And I know now, once you hear my whole story, you'll understand why I know that some of it was authentically Christian. I was praying to Jesus. If I had known that the things I was taught about Jesus weren't true, I would have instantly changed. So my sincerity was there, and Jesus was there with me, for sure. But so there was that, but I had teachings that were wrong. So that polluted it, is what I'm trying to say. And so while some of what I was experiencing really was Christ and really was Jesus, it was mixed with all kinds of other influences that I can confidently say now were demonic. And I think that ultimately lead to, I didn't become a narcissist, but I think that the teachings of demonic entities are very demonic. I think they're very narcissistic. I think the focus on self, the focus on the higher self, the focus that you're already perfect. My guides didn't really say that you're God, because that just seemed like a hard line for me that I wouldn't personally buy into, but that you're already perfect, that you're this incredible being already, you're so powerful and you're just not aware, and you just have to go out and believe you're that powerful being and you'll be that powerful being. That kind of teaching, and especially along with the teaching that you are God, it leads to a spiritual narcissism. And I have seen this spiritual ego and spiritual narcissism. I've been on the path now 27 years or so, and I was heavily involved in the New Age for 10. And I still know a lot of those people. And some of them are great, actually. Some of them are really neat people. But a lot of them have slipped into spiritual narcissism. Or they've gotten caught up and become unstable because of their involvement in the occult, even though they don't know that it's a cult. And so my first teacher was extremely powerful guy. He was like my father, and I still think of him that way. But I can see a damage that his teaching did in me and a number of other people. And and I can say that without just still laying at his feet and saying, man, thank you for existing, because he saved my life, and he showed me, he put me on a spiritual path, an intense one that's uniquely intense and rare to find in this world. And I'll always be deeply grateful. But he did, he was totally New Age, a direct disciple of Jesus, but the wrong idea about Jesus. So that's the best I can say it. I think he had Jesus mixed with all kinds of other stuff, same as me. And one of the things I think he did that harmed people is he really encouraged us to develop our spiritual gifts. And there's techniques probably borrowed from the East, but they're also borrowed from occult practices. And there's, breathing techniques, or there's visualizations, or there's just this encouragement to develop these gifts that you have earned in past lifetimes. And the whole point of being spiritual is to develop these gifts. And, there's a tiny bit of truth in that. The New Testament addresses what gifts are good for and what they're not good for, and what their place is. And, there are letters in the New Testament really castigating the over focus on gifts. And then also the New Testament clearly doesn't think you've earned them. They're all gifts from God. So there's no spiritual pride around having gifts if you have them. The New Age, though, really teaches you if you have spiritual gifts, if you're advanced mystically, if you have a lot of powerful experiences, that's because you're advanced. And that leads to arrogance and ego also, and a ton of it. So there's a damage there that I saw in this arrogance. But more than that, I have witnessed a number of people's lives get completely wrecked by channeling and by psychic communication with whatever they think they're talking to. And it's no exaggeration to say that I've seen lives completely wrecked by it. So there are real dangers in the New Age. I've seen people fail to grow spiritually because they're listening to their guides who are amateurs. They're not enlightened. They're not awake. They claim to be ascended masters, but they can't help a person navigate just through childhood trauma or, you name it. You name the spiritual struggle someone's going through. The advice that these entities give, if you've read a real tradition that can produce saints, and then you read the advice that these entities give, it's amateur hour. They don't know what they're talking about at all. And it's just obvious. Once you've been exposed to like Christianity that has maps, that understands the stages of spiritual growth and exactly how to navigate each stage, all based on Jesus' teachings. When you understand a system like that well, you read channeled material and it's just so shallow. It's not going to bring people to sainthood. But worse than that, so I've seen one woman I know, very psychic. When I had my blinding white light experience, I hadn't told anyone yet. And when I ran into her, she said, this weekend you had a very powerful experience. And she described her experience of it. And it wasn't what I saw, but it was the result of what happened to me. She described the results. And, that's truly, she was truly psychic. But also, I've watched that hurt her. I've watched that tapping into those dimensions cause her mental illness and emotional instability. And that's sad. But see, that is one of the goals of these entities. They love to string a person along and cause them harm. Or occasionally, I think they prop a person up and leave them up and don't destroy them, at least in no way that I could see, but so that the people who listen to them are destroyed. So you have to understand the demonic presence is real, and they're way more intelligent than us. They're 1,000 times more intelligent than human beings. So they know how to trick. They know how to deceive. I could think of another example. There's another woman I knew, same thing. Her and her sister, very psychic. That's the one I think that I've seen cause the most harm, is the psychic stuff. Very psychic, naturally gifted that way, naturally intuitive. But I noticed arrogance from the beginning, but back then I was a lot more naive. So I don't know if I would have called it arrogance, but it was spiritual ego. And I remember thinking, you guys, you're always talking to your guides. You're always talking about all these gifts you have. You come to see me for help now and then, but you don't really listen. And I could just feel an air of superiority from them. So, and that's fine. I mean, they're really neat women, both of them. I really liked them. But the older sister had these spirit guides that were teaching her, and they were training her, and her energies were going up and up and up. And they told her that she needed to go on a cruise, and that on this cruise, she would meet this other guy they've been training. And that when they met, their energies would come together and, I don't remember exactly, triple or quadruple, or some massive thing would happen that just blew her into, so far ahead spiritually. So she, followed that. She did what her guide said. And she went on the cruise and she did meet the guy, and he was told the same thing. I mean, that's crazy. And the energies did explode. And this is really true, and it's sad, and it's, to me, it's one of the most tragic things I've ever heard, that I've directly heard. I mean, I've heard of other worse things, but that happened through the occult and everything. But this is one of the worst things I've ever heard. She met this guy. Her energies went up and exploded. She was rocketed into whatever, I don't really know, but she said it was very, very, very intense and way stronger than her spirituality had been before that. And she was a pretty serious person about spirituality. Most of these people, that's all they're looking for in their whole life. But the thing is, it was so much power that it hurt her. She lost chunks of her hair. She had lost a couple teeth, and she looked like she'd aged about, I mean, I think I had seen her a year before, And the next time that I saw her, she looked like she'd aged 15 or 20 years. And she mentioned this as the result of what happened to her. I mean, she said it to me. She was telling me what had happened to her. And so I just naively assumed that she was done with that world forever. I looking back, I can tell she wasn't presenting it that way, but I just naively assumed she's done with that. I said, so you're done with all that now, right? You're going to give all that up? And she said, no. This is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And she looked terrible. She looked like someone who'd been doing crack. I know she wasn't, but she looked like someone that was doing meth or something. It really wrecked her. And so that's the kind of damage. That's an extreme example, but that's the kind of damage that I have witnessed happen when you're messing around with spirituality that you don't understand. And in her case, doing practices that are just condemned by Christianity. They're just condemned. Everyone knows that's not the way to God. But she didn't know, and so she got hurt. And that's the kind of thing that I did crystals. And, I think crystals are just stones. I don't think there's much to them. But when you believe they're magical items and that each one of the stones has a specific magical energy and gift, it's just a different way of being introduced into the occult. And also it's one that gives you control over what you learn and what you grow from, because you get to pick which ones you want. And so absent a system that knows how to navigate all the different dimensions of spirituality in a way that is balanced and true and that leads you to union with God, absent that knowledge, you've got this crystal system that gives you a vast range of things to choose from, and you're choosing your favorites, and you're getting overdeveloped in one way and underdeveloped in another, and you get out of balance. And that's what happened to me. I got way out of balance. I would get sick a lot, although there's a way that happens with Christianity too sometimes. But I got sick a lot. But the main thing is I was greedy. I got greedy. I was having, I was getting higher and higher into these upper dimensions, and I don't talk about it much anymore, but there was about a 5-year period where I never wasn't getting blown into other dimensions and feeling the power so strong, and it just was happening all the time. And so that was my sort of 10-year experience in the New Age. But one day, this kind of all happened around the same time, but one day, after peeking into what Eastern mystics would probably call enlightenment. I mean, it didn't stick, so I guess it wasn't fully enlightened, but I think I spent a long period of time, a few months, completely enlightened from the Eastern perspective. And it was really neat. But I don't think I know that's not what God had in mind for me. And so one day, and I can't remember which all came first, so it's I don't want to be dishonest, so I just don't know. But a number of things happened. One thing that happened is I started feeling drawn closer to Jesus than I had been. And remember, Jesus was my guy. If people said, get a guru, I would say, I have a guru, that's Jesus. Like, that's how into Jesus I was. And one day, I started getting called closer to Jesus. And I started to think, man, I just wish there was a book you could trust to know who Jesus was. And I knew it wasn't the Bible because I'd been taught from a child that it had all been changed and warped. And that's not true. And if you're watching this video and you think it's true, I really encourage you to listen to Wes Huff on YouTube. Wes Huff is a biblical scholar. He's going around right now undoing all of the lies the New Age tells about the Bible, and he's doing it with facts. I learned it from the Catholic Church. I learned the church history, the history of how the Bible came together, and that we have an unbroken chain of literature and saints from Jesus to today. And I just learned that the myth that it had all been changed and warped, there's no place at which you can insert that historically. We just have evidence that it isn't true, but I was taught that. And so, so if you're taught that, try to try to be open-minded and really research this, because you're going to find out that the Bible's the most trustworthy book we have from history, and it hasn't been changed. You might think they're wrong, and that's okay, like in what they thought, but it's really not possible to think that what is written down isn't what they meant. Actually, it just isn't true. But I thought it was true, so I was in that camp. And so I'm wondering, I just wish I could find something I could trust, because this channeled book says this about Jesus, this one says something totally different, this one says this, and I started to realize they can't all be right. That means most of them have to be wrong. And then I started hearing people from the New Age say things like, well, they're all true. It's just whatever your truth is. And that's another thing that I've seen cause mental illness in people is relativism. The notion that there is no inherent truth, that nothing is really real, it's all an illusion, even right and wrong, even good and bad is all an illusion. And that's called relativism, and some people I'm sure are fine if they believe it, but I've watched some people truly become mentally ill by believing that. They lose their way. They go into deep and profound sin, thinking it's okay. They allow nefarious actors into their life because they're unable to call a spade a spade. In some of the very best New Age people I know, the ones who I really love deeply and respect, I see an appalling inability to just call out something that is wrong. And it's because so much of the literature teaches you that if you see sin, you are still unenlightened. If you can see right from wrong, you're in judgment. And if you're in judgment, you're not enlightened. So it's anathema. You can't see it. And people that take that to heart, they lose their ability to just call out BS when it's there. And that's a problem in a world full of scammers and con men and sexual predators and fakes and frauds and narcissists. And you can't live in a world without seeing. And that's one of the damages I've seen is really good people who have wisdom, who I'm talking about people I respect, who in some ways I look up to, like they're really deep people, but they can't correct things in their sphere because they can't call it out because it's wrong to see it. So they're busy trying not to see it and then allowing things that shouldn't be happening to happen. And so that's blinders. And that's a demonic teaching. I mean, that is a core demonic teaching, is if they can get you to believe that discernment is judgment. If they can get you to believe that you have to give up discernment to give up judgment, then they can make you capable of monstrous things or incapable of calling out monstrous things. And the level of pain I've seen that just erode into the fabric of people's lives is immense. So I'm getting called to Jesus and wishing there was a book I could read. And then I start getting called to Christianity, which blew my mind. And so I met a guy who was from the New Age, but who had left the New Age and become totally Christian. And he was Catholic and he was all the way in, and he's actually extremely enlightened. I know we don't use that word in Christianity, but he had a very advanced prayer life. A continuous, profound relationship with Christ. And so he started encouraging me to trust that the New Testament was legitimate. So then I started investigating, and I went to a church near my home, and I got really lucky in that there was a priest there who was a theologian. So, and I mentioned in my last video, just, very high level, sophisticated Christian thinking. And he was willing to spend time with me. So I would just go to his house. We would drink tea. He was an Irish priest. We would drink black tea and get just hopped up on caffeine. And he would teach me theology. And it changed my life. But around that time, when I decided to truly be Christian and leave the New Age, that eventually pulled me out of the New Age. I had a very impactful mystical experience. And I mentioned the one in last week's, or the last video I posted, I mentioned the experience I had reading theology and having just 5 hours of blinding white light and then being told that the New Testament could be trusted. That happened. But right after that, I was in prayer, and an angel came in the room and put a lid on my head. And from that day forward, I was unable to go up at all. All of my mystical experiences stopped. I used to have quite a number of powerful dreams, visions, sort of miracle stuff was happening. Miracles would happen. Just a lot of bliss, a lot of power feeling all the time. And it all went away. And that was a shock. It was an angel. This was a gift they gave me. And this addresses the comment that someone wrote in. They said, how did you, how do you navigate it without thinking everything was bad and that you had to throw it all out? Did you have to throw out everything from the New Age? And I want to answer that, yes, the Holy Spirit did make me throw everything out. In fact, they just took it away completely. And, my whole life was God for that 10 years. My whole life was New Age spirituality mixed with good stuff. But to separate the wheat from the chaff, I don't know how it would have been done. If you took away every New Age influence and left just what was there from Jesus, that's what I have now. But it was impossible to extricate the two for me. If they sent any power on me at all, I'd be right back into my New Age thinking and associating with, this crystal or this teaching or this book that I read or this experience I had. And I would color it. So I was poisoning Christ with my past experience. So the way they fixed it is to put me in, like the dark night of the soul, but not the way the dark night of the soul is described by common usage. It's a very specific thing. And all of my mystical experience went away. All of it for 10 years. There's some exceptions there, but it went away. It was taken from me. And it was good, but it didn't feel good. It was a shock, obviously, from what was happening to me before to feeling really spiritually dead or destitute or in the desert. And I know it lasted 10 years. It could have lasted longer, but it lasted 10 years. There were grades of it, depths of it. And I learned so much then. But the main thing I want to say in regards to the questioner is, yeah, I had to throw it all out, but it was taken from me and I didn't like it. And sometimes I was kicking and screaming. Every once in a while I would feel that old power come back and think, okay, good, I'm back. And I would feel the spiritual ego that came with it. I'm not even saying I was a particularly egoic person. I don't think people saw me as particularly egoic. So I don't want to give you the wrong impression there. But there is spiritual ego associated with that stuff. And it would come back. And also the instability I had. It was like someone who's high all the time. And it's not good. That's not good. There was something missing. So in addition to, so there were two things I had in the New Age. I had real Christ and high levels of prayer from that, mixed with poisonous New Age and demonic stuff. But I did have real Christ, but I only had the upper end of the picture. So I was a tree with no roots is the way I look at this. So they just took it away. And for 10 years, it was gone with once in a while flashes of it that would come back. I think it was a grace from God to bring them back just for maybe like 4 minutes or 5 minutes. So I could see just how quickly old thinking, old New Age thought would come back into my consciousness. And I think it's like they were saying, Clinton, we need to free you from all of this false theology, some of which is demonic and some of which is just wrong. We need to free you from it, but you've got it associated with the power of God. And so we've just got to kill that off for like a while until it all dies away, and then we'll give Christ back. And so, yeah, crystal's gone, New Age literature gone. I never expose myself to any of those things anymore. I'm just completely uninterested now. And that took a while to come to because I had experienced a lot of power in the New Age and a lot of transformation that was somewhat good. So I did have to let it all go for real. And also, as I became more mature in that, I wanted to let it all go because I thought, I've always been a disciple of Jesus. Now I know who the real Jesus is. And now I know that he did teach a path to union with God, and that it has been preserved faithfully in the Christian tradition. And I know that if someone just came and said, Clinton, there are two islands, and Buddha and Jesus have come back. Buddha's on one island and Jesus is on the other island. Where will you go? I would go to Jesus immediately. And so I started to gain a deep respect for the Christian faith, that it was accurately helping people find what Christ meant. The New Age had ruined that, but then I learned differently. I learned about the saints, especially the saints. And I learned, how hard it is to produce saints generation after generation. You have to know what you're doing to do that. Hold on. So they took it all away from me for 10 years straight, until it was completely removed, until every shred of influence from the old way, from the New Age movement, from the occult, from whatever I had been involved in, was completely erased from my neural pathways, from my memory, from my heart, from my will. I had it all completely removed. The night does a lot of other good things, but I won't go into that now. That's part of what it did for me. And then began an ascent towards the light that is truly Christian. But I was given roots at that time. I was given a whole dimension of spirituality I did not get from the New Age. There's a ton of nuance there that I want to go into. So my computer, I just noticed my computer said I'm low on space. And if I don't stop the video before I run out of space, I'm going to lose this piece. So I'm just going to call this part 1, and then I'll shoot a part 2. See you in the next video.